use you as the cadaver. In Florida, they have dead bodies. They never can find out who they are, and so they sell those bodies. And so they can sell you in Florida. And so if you die down there in spring break and nobody knows who you are, they'll say, "Oh, who is this? Okay, who wants to buy this one?" And so
There's just something weird about putting a price on like a human.
But they've got a board or a council or whatever is in charge of dead bodies in Alabama, and there's certain things you can do and you can't do to dead bodies. And
Imagine telling people that's your job.
Yeah. So, but they're getting more to the electronic stuff. But for science, it's better probably to have the real thing, and so to cut on and look at. But the PTs, they know the body and they'll know every nerve, everything, and they know. Them and the orthopedic surgeons know everything. Okay, and so they're experts, and normally that's the first class you take, and then that's the class that weeds the people out that just can't cut it. Okay, not because it makes them sick, because academically they can't learn the body's parts and joints and nerves and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm surprised. We have people in med school. I have graduates there. I have people working in doctoral programs. Got them in Florida State, got them in Kentucky, got them different places. OT, let me see, Skylar, she wants to go to physician assistant school. So some people in physician assistant school. So, there's lots of options. And you're young, and you may change tomorrow. Okay? And so I was looking at some stuff the other day. A lot of the most famous people in the world never do what they did now until they were like 50 or 60 or 40. I think Martha Stewart was a stockbroker until she was like 35, or and so forth. So I still don't know what I want to do, and I'm in my 70s, so I'm trying to figure it out. But yeah, now most of y'all are smart enough. You can do anything you want to do, right? Right? So you need to have what? Believe in yourself, right? In my history, let me see. I've worked here. I've taught at Alabama State. I've taught at Auburn. I've taught at Alabama. Part-time stuff. Troy, UAB, North Alabama, UAH. And so, and then I've worked with people at Florida State, University of Florida, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, New Mexico, Arizona, San Francisco, Seattle, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, where else? Ireland, Scotland, Belgium, France, Brazil, Paraguay, Peru, Mexico. And so I've had a lot of students and worked with a lot of people, and y'all are just as smart as the people from Harvard I work with, just as smart as the people from Princeton, that are just as smart as people from Stanford, okay? And y'all can do just as good as them. And so whatever you decide to do, you can do it. You got the brain. What do you need? The desire and the work to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. When I got out of high school, I was like a C student in high school. going to the Army, did a bunch of stuff. I wasn't a good student. And then got my master's, and then I found something I liked, and then I went wide open then. So, and our best student we've ever had, Dr. Esco, I thought I was going to have to kick him out of school. And so he had like a 2.3 or 4, and so then he was a grad assistant, and then he went to Auburn, and then he went to the University of Alabama, and now he's one of the top exercise physiologists in the country. So and so he's big dog now. So and some people bloom a little later than others, and so forth. Usually women know more what they want to do earlier than guys do. Guys get lost a lot of time in the shuffle, so it takes them a little bit longer to figure out stuff. So whatever you want to do, you can do it. I got confidence in you. No doubt. So we got some really smart people in this class, and if you want to be a doctor, or if you want to go to Harvard or whatever, the hard thing's getting in. And then after you get in, everybody's about the same. Okay? So have confidence in yourself. Okay. Now Macbeth's a special student, right? Because what does she do? Comes every day to class, gets no credit for class, helps with class. So I made her a certificate.
Do I have to get up?
Department of
You have to give a
Kinesiology
speech, too.
Leadership Award. I've got it in 2 colors.
Oh, wow.
Take your choice.
Okay. Awesome.
Conferred upon Elizabeth Macbeth, has been recognized for outstanding leadership in exercise science, Auburn University at Montgomery.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Is
you.
this like legit or?
Legit.
Can I, yeah.
I'd give you a hug, but they no hugging in
Thank
this
you.
class. But no, it's she knows what she wants to do, and is going for it, and so that's good. And I appreciate her helping and asking questions and doing stuff in class. So that's good leadership, right? Good leadership. Okay, we're going to have a special guest presentation today by Jennifer, right?
I'm gonna pull up, yes sir, I'm gonna pull up the PowerPoint that you have
Okay,
for the chapter 9.
okay. And she's going to talk to you about pregnancy. You'd rather me talk to you about pregnancy or her? She probably does a little bit more than I do.
First-hand examples.
I had 2 kids. My wife had 2 kids, but I was just like an observer.
Okay, so what I handed y'all was it's just a medical examination before starting an exercise program for pregnant women. If y'all didn't know, pregnancy is when a mother has a baby. And this is just like about the changes in the metabolic demands and all the changes going on in the body. It usually lasts 38 to 40 weeks, and it's split up into trimesters. So it's just the first 3 months is the first trimester, and so on. So some of the changes that occur are an increase in blood volume, because now you have more tissue, you have another life to support, so you have more blood, because that's how it's getting its nutrients. An increase in resting blood pressure and decreased diastolic blood pressure. It is also very common for resting blood pressure or for systolic to decrease as well. It usually only decreases by about 5, but diastolic can decrease from anywhere from 10 to 50. And then anemia and fatigue are also very common because you are growing and supporting another person. Anemia is just a decrease in the red blood cells, which is also common for low iron, so low iron anemia. And then soft tissue edema, which we'll get to once we start going through the checklist. So it obviously you have another person growing inside of you, so you're going to gain some weight. It's very common to gain about 10 to 16 kilograms. Many women which we'll get to the numbers of women who exercise when they're pregnant. But many women gain much more than that, just because exercise seems like it's less important. People think that rest is more important while you are pregnant, and sometimes that is the case, but not all the time. So some things to consider while you're training a woman who is pregnant is her center of gravity is changing. As your stomach grows, your center of gravity changes. You have an imbalance between your hip flexors and your hip extensors, an altered glenohumeral and cervical spine mechanics. And then, as Dr. Williford has touched on before, because of the hormones that you produce, you have an increased joint laxity and bone density loss. I was told in my last appointment that he is pretty much checking all of my calcium. So I've been told to increase the calcium intake just because as his bones aren't going to grow and get stronger without it. So yeah, this is just about what I passed out to y'all, which we'll start going over. So the first page, the first paragraph, it talks about the benefits of starting an exercise program while you are pregnant. Most women don't, but there are a lot of women who are the healthiest when they're pregnant because they're more cognizant of the benefits of it for them and their baby as far as exercise and nutrition goes. So the benefits include improved aerobic and muscular fitness, promotion of appropriate weight gain, and the facilitation of labor. There are a lot of exercises, stretches, yoga, Kegels, stuff like that can help with labor, make it a lot easier. And then it prevents gestational glucose intolerance. I always thought that, like gestational diabetes, I always thought it was just because women weren't exercising as much and they were probably eating more carbs, more sugars. But actually the placenta has hormones that cause the glucose to stay in the blood for a lot longer. So that's why gestational diabetes is such a problem. And then pregnancy-induced hypertension, which is just gestational hypertension, and it usually occurs after week 20. So then the next part, over to the right, it's just saying that you want to give this to your client, or if you're the one that's pregnant, then you want to fill it out yourself. And then you're going to give it to your healthcare provider, and they're going to go through it and look for any contraindications, which we'll get to on the back. So then we'll go down to, pretty sure that's the next slide, yeah. I'll click on it. The general health status. So you want to go through things like if you've had a miscarriage in an earlier pregnancy, if you have a history of that, it's more common in the future. Any other pregnancy complications. Of course, if there's complications, you want to touch on those, figure out what those are. So then, status of the current pregnancy. So this is when we get into all of the fun stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and tell y'all that some of it's kind of gross, and we're just going to dive right in. So marked fatigue. It is actually pretty common in the first trimester as your hormones are imbalanced and trying to balance back out to feel a lot of fatigue. And then once you get to around 30 weeks, the baby is taking all of your energy pretty much. As he grows and continues to get bigger, because that's when around then is when they start putting on their own weight, fatigue is also common. But if there is just an increase in fatigue and you're noticing it, then it could also be a problem. Bleeding from the vagina, which can be a sign of a miscarriage or placenta previa or placental eruption, which we'll get to all these things on the back. But it's also very common in the first trimester, so as long as you're in the first trimester and it's just spotting, it's normal, but after that, it's definitely something that you want to consider. As we said, there are changes with your blood pressure, with your blood volume, which can attribute to any kind of faintness or dizziness, but if it's becoming a problem, then it's something that you definitely need to get checked out. Because it can be signs of all those other things I've mentioned, like placenta previa and signs of a miscarriage. Let's see, sudden swelling of the ankles, I'll say something that's common. Every day, whenever I get home, everything weighs down to swollen, like my ankles, my feet, my legs, my calves, everything is swollen. After I've like walked a couple of miles, then I'll start feeling it. But if a woman isn't exercising, if she's not on her feet a lot, if she's just kind of laying around, because they told me that when it's swollen to lay down. But if she's still experiencing that edema, then it can be like signs of serious issues, such as preeclampsia, which is just that hypertension. But along with the hypertension, you have issues with an organ, and it's usually issues with your liver or kidneys, which can be spotted by just a simple urinalysis and by finding protein in the urine, if y'all heard about that. Swelling, pain, or redness in the calf of one leg is a clot. It's a deep vein thrombosis, which can be a very serious issue for anyone, not just for someone who's pregnant. But if they're only swelling in one leg, like how I said, by the end of the day, I'm swollen in both of my legs. If it was just one, then it would be a big concern. And then absence of fetal movement after 6 months. Obviously, if you're not feeling the baby move, there's an issue. But they say the 6th month because usually by the 6th month, then his movements are pretty regular. You feel them on a regular basis. And you know, like, I know that he'll usually move later at night or early in the morning. So once you kind of get a feel for the baby's patterns, then you'll know that if it's not happening after the 6th month, there may be issues. And then failure to gain weight after the 5th month. So after the 5th month, he starts putting on his own weight and starts growing much more significantly. So if you aren't putting on weight, then he's not putting on weight, and that can be from causes which we'll get to on the back. So we'll flip over to the contraindications. A ruptured membrane or premature labor is the first of the absolute contraindications. A ruptured membrane means that your water has broken, so you need to go have a baby. Don't need to work out. Persistent 2nd or 3rd trimester bleeding, which how I told y'all it was common in the 1st trimester, but in the 2nd and 3rd, it's not common. It shouldn't be happening unless you have placenta previa, which I'm gonna do the best I can, you know. So in the womb, it's a circle, and then you have the cervix down here where the baby is gonna come out, hopefully at some point. The placenta is supposed to be back here on the top. With placenta previa, it's down at the bottom. Most of the times it's blocking the cervix, so the baby can't come out. If it's down at the bottom, then it's common to have bleeding because of the increased pressure on the placenta, which is why you don't need to be working out as much. There are restrictions. I actually have placenta previa, so I've been told not to get, which there is a heart rate chart we'll get to, but my doctor told me not to get my heart rate above between 130 and 140, not to lift more than like 10 to 15 pounds. Yeah. From what I've heard, it's pretty rare. It's not very common, and if it does occur, it's very common for the placenta to, like, it can continue to move up. But yeah, it isn't super common. And if it does occur, it usually fixes itself. But lucky for me, it has not. So, oh, and then so the risk that comes with that is that you have to have a C-section. Usually it isn't that big of an issue unless you are not following the rules and continuing an exercise program without considering that. You can have what's called a placental abruption, which is where the placenta detaches from the baby. Clearly a very bad thing. And we've talked about pregnancy-induced hypertension is just high blood pressure, which usually fixes itself after delivery. And then preeclampsia is the high blood pressure with, let me make sure it is, yeah, kidneys or liver damage, which is spotted by that urinalysis. Next we have incompetent cervix. So this is where we start getting into the kind of gross stuff. Boys, I'm going to go ahead and apologize because some of these things y'all probably never heard of. So in your cervix, you have what's called a mucus plug. Young. And if that happens to come out too soon, or if your cervix, the part where the baby comes out, starts to dilate too soon, it usually means that it's too weak to hold the pressure, hold the weight of the baby, and it can result in preterm labor if it's not taken care of. So if you have an incompetent cervix, it's just too weak to hold the baby. Usually you get put on bed rest until the time comes. But definitely you should not be working out. It's really bad bed rest. And then an intrauterine growth restriction has, like I was saying, the placenta with placenta previa can get in the way. That's just an example of an intrauterine growth restriction. I wrote down some other ones. High blood pressure. Mothers who smoke or drink can also be an intrauterine growth restriction, which that just means that there is something in the uterus that is getting in the way of the baby growing. Growth restriction. It's literally just restricting him from growth, which is why earlier I said that if you're not putting on weight after the 5th month, then there are signs of issues. Next we have high order pregnancy. Any pregnancy in which you're having more than one baby is considered a risk. Triplets are an absolute contraindication, and then we'll see on the relative side that twins are a relative contraindication. Just because you have more to support, you have more baby, taking more nutrients and taking more blood, and increased risk of all of those different kinds of problems with the placenta or with intrauterine growth restrictions, because now you have 2 babies and 1 uterus. And then of course we know that any kind of uncontrolled metabolic, cardiovascular, or what else does it say, respiratory or systemic disorder, anything like that that's uncontrolled is already an issue. But when you're dealing with not just your life, but the life of your unborn child, it is a much bigger issue. And then we'll move over to the relative side. As I said earlier, that if you have a history of a miscarriage or premature labor, usually if you have a history of anything, it's more common for it to occur again in the future. And then mild to moderate cardiovascular respiratory disease, as I just said, you're not just dealing with yourself, you're dealing with the baby too. So if you have any kind of disease, it's gonna affect you and your baby. So it's definitely things that need to be taken care of. Anemia or iron deficiency, which we've already touched on, malnutrition or eating disorders. Clearly an issue, again, whether or not you're pregnant, but you do have to take in more nutrients if you're carrying a baby and having to support it. So yeah. And then twin pregnancy after the 28th week. As I said before, twin pregnancy is also considered high risk. After the 28th week is when they really start putting on their own weight. So you're gonna be a lot bigger than a person who's carrying one baby, obviously. And then any other significant medical condition. Let's get along to the back. Keep going. Prescription for aerobic activity. The best time to progress is during the 2nd trimester, since risk and discomfort to pregnancy are the lowest at that time. Honestly, the 2nd trimester was the best out of all 3 of them. I'm now in the 3rd, and it, as I said before, fatigue is bad. Everything just gets a lot worse. But you really do feel a lot better in the 2nd. In the 1st, you've got new hormones, you've got new things going on in your body, and it's trying to adjust to that. So, it is a lot harder. Whenever I was in the 1st trimester, I was training still. Like I'm a personal trainer, so I was training clients, and I would wake up at 6 in the morning, and I would have to pull over on the way there to go throw up, and then halfway through the session, I would have to stop and go to the bathroom and throw up. So it's just not very fun. So then we'll have a warm up and a cool down, which I think I'll pull up that slide later. We'll go through the Phed principle. You want to begin at 3 times per week and increase it to 4 times per week. Intensity, if you're using a target heart rate zone, as I said before, the heart rate is going to change. So So you don't wanna use the resting heart rate, if you're doing heart rate reserve, you don't wanna use the heart rate that the woman had before pregnancy, you wanna use one now. Time, this says attempt 15 minutes. Let me pull up what you have up here. Yeah. 15 minutes seems a little strict, a little conservative to me. I feel like it shouldn't be that hard to do 15 minutes. Dr. Wilford has 20 to 30 minutes. You definitely wanna allow rest in between. Yeah, also keep in mind that I get out of breath just from walking here from the parking lot. So, I say 15 minutes shouldn't be too hard, but as long as you're keeping it within that intensity range, it should be fine. And then type, of course, so it says walking, stationary cycling, swimming, aquatic exercises, and low impact aerobics. My doctor actually told me not to even get on a bike, not a stationary cycle, once you get into the second trimester, because if you fall off or if something happens with the bike and you lose your balance or anything like that, if you hit your stomach, then you're gonna have problems. So a stationary bike is okay up until a certain point, and I guess after that, it's really just up to the mother. And then the talk test, as I said before, this is a good way, I think, to figure out intensity, because I do get out of breath a lot faster because there is a 3-pound baby pushing on my lungs and my diaphragm. So that's something that you want to consider if you are training while you're pregnant or training someone who is pregnant. Let's see. Obviously though, if the mom is struggling for oxygen, that's where the baby's getting their nutrients. So, if mom's struggling for oxygen, baby's struggling for oxygen. And then the heart rate ranges for pregnant women. Skip that one, yeah. So there's a chart here. There's also a chart on the paper. Like I told y'all before, my doctor told me, obviously 20 to 29. My doctor told me to keep it there between the 129 to 144 range. So that's definitely going to depend on what contraindications y'all find while going through this medical evaluation. And then you don't want, it's important to know beforehand how active the mother was before getting pregnant, because now is not the time to start training for a marathon or start some intense resistance training or anything like that. Now is just the time to maintain your fitness and work on those goals that were at the beginning of the paragraph. Yeah, and then the RPE, which is always a good, well, I say it's always good, but if you have someone who, I mean, obviously they can lie to you and say that one person can be on 14 while they're, like Dr. Wilford was saying Monday. Alright, we'll move on to the second page. Says prescription for muscular conditioning. So the first 3 things all talk about the promotion of good posture. So you obviously an increase in weight in the front part of your body, which can affect your shoulders can run forward and you can lean forward. So working on the upper back, lower back, and abdomen, and then it gives you some examples all the way to the right. But that does help with the promotion of good posture. And then for abdomen, low back pain is a very, very common issue. And then diastasis recti. So the abdominal wall, I don't know if y'all have ever, this is what I think of, like seeing not a cartoon picture, but like a picture of abs, or I guess any, but there's the white line that goes in between. So that tissue can protrude forward, and essentially your abdominal wall separates into 2 because of the increased pressure and because of those hormones, everything is relaxing. With diastasis recti, the tissue protrudes forward. So if a woman is contracting her abs and you notice that there's tissue coming forward, then it's diastasis recti. That's not something that you really want to work on during pregnancy, but after pregnancy, postpartum, It can easily be fixed. Sometimes you do have to have surgery to fix it, but usually in most cases, just working through a training program to work on that will fix it. And then strengthening the muscles of labor. As I told y'all before, there are a lot, I think farther down we'll get into that, but there are a lot of ways to help with the facilitation of labor. Yoga is a big one, and flexibility, which I know we've talked about how important flexibility is in this class. And then of course upper body is important, and then buttocks and lower limbs, facilitation of weight bearing, and then prevention of varicose veins. As the pressure in your legs and this area increases, varicose veins will pop up. So making sure that you're training that area will help with that. And then we'll get into the precautions and things to consider while you're pregnant and training. They do not want you laying on your back at all. I believe it's the inferior vena cava and the abdominal aorta can get cut off if you're laying on your back. You have an increase or a decreased blood pressure, which can affect you obviously with faintness, dizziness, that kind of thing, but it also cuts off the supply for the baby. So they encourage either laying on your side if you have to lay down, or standing up, or I've even been doing some like just sitting on my knees. Yeah, there it is. The inferior vena cava and the abdominal aorta. And then joint laxity, it's the increasing hormone levels, the progesterone and relaxin increases as you're pregnant, which is something to consider because your joints are now more prone to injury. So it says to avoid rapid changes in direction and balancing during exercises. Another reason to avoid a sudden change is what's called round ligament pain. Pretty much your uterus has two ligaments that are about right here and go all the way down, and they are stretched as your uterus grows. And if I sneeze, or if I get up too fast, or if I change directions too quickly, it hurts pretty badly. So that's another thing to consider. So yeah, you want to keep everything controlled. You don't want to do anything too explosively. And so abdominal muscles, we touched on diastasis recti, which is just the bulging of connective tissue along the midline. Other things to consider that go along with abdominal muscles. These are some of more things that y'all probably don't want to hear, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Hernias and hemorrhoids are very common. So straining can either cause those, or if the woman already has it, can worsen it. It's also very common to get an umbilical hernia, which is a hernia in your belly button. So doing any kind of straining with your abs can definitely make that much worse. And then once you already have an umbilical hernia, it can make the chances of diastasis recti increase. And then we'll get to the precautions. Emphasis placed on continuous breathing. The oxygen you're getting is the oxygen the baby's getting. So you want to make sure that you're breathing normally. Another thing to consider is breathing normally to prevent the Valsalva maneuver, which I believe we'll get to on the back. Oh no, it's right here. So it's just holding your breath while you're working against a resistance. It can cause a sudden drop in blood pressure. Like I said before, it affects you and it affects the baby because that's where he's getting his oxygen, his nutrients from. So you definitely want to avoid the Valsalva maneuver. Another thing to consider, it says avoid exercise in the supine position, which we touched on. Another fun thing that I've been dealing with is most women are probably going to want to avoid bending over. The increased levels of progesterone and relaxin not only affect your relaxation of your joints and your muscles, but it also affects your digestive tract. So whenever I bend over, I have really bad heartburn. I actually have it really bad all the time. But when I bend over, it almost always happens. So I've learned that while I'm working out, not to bend over at all. So that's just another fun thing to keep in mind. And we'll move on to the back. rice. These are all things that we've touched on. A healthy eating, it says the need for calories is about 300 calories more. Most women will say that they are eating for two. They are not eating for two normal-sized humans. That is something that I hear a lot, and it always drives me crazy because I'm like, you do not need that much food. Like, so yeah, it just increases by about 300 calories a day, which is why another reason that anorexia or bulimia or any kind of malnutrition is a big factor, because if you are dealing with these problems, not only are you not getting enough nutrients for you, but you're not getting that plus 300 cal a day that is going to affect the baby. And it gives you some lists of healthy foods. Another thing that can affect blood pressure and all that is if the woman is dehydrated. Most people do not drink as much water. I know that I have been much thirstier and I've been drinking plenty, but it recommends drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. And then salt intake should not be restricted. Like, you just want to make sure you're getting in those electrolytes. Limit caffeine intake. I feel like that's something we all know. And then dieting to lose weight is not recommended during pregnancy. Again, I feel like that's something we should all know because you're putting on a good bit of weight. And then it gets into body image. And then at the very end, we get to these safety considerations. The first one is avoid exercising in warm, humid environments, especially during the first trimester. As I told y'all before, the first trimester has been the worst so far because the nausea and all the other gross things that happen, just from that change in hormones and your body noticing a change. And then you want to avoid isometric exercise or straining while holding your breath. That's the Valsalva maneuver that we just talked about. Yeah, we touched on all of these. Again though, know your limits. Pregnancy is not the time to train for athletic competition. It is the time to maintain that fitness and work on those goals that are in the front and the first paragraph, just to improve aerobic and muscular fitness, promote appropriate weight gain, and to improve the facilitation of labor. Another thing is just that, like I said before, appropriate weight gain. About 25% of women, let me see, I have it down. Less than 25% of women exercise regularly while they're pregnant, and about 40 to 60 are not just inactive, but like completely inactive while they're pregnant. Just because when you're pregnant, most people think that rest and relaxation is the most important, which I think that's changed a lot as we've done more studies and more research, but that's just what happens. Like, most people don't work out. And then the reasons to stop exercise or consult your healthcare provider. Excessive shortness of breath, like we touched on that already. It can definitely be a pulmonary issue. Like I said, if you're not getting the oxygen, baby's not getting enough oxygen. Chest pain is always a reason to stop. Painful uterine contractions, which means it can also be Braxton Hicks. It doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going into labor, but if you're having pain in your abdominal area, it can mean a lot of things. So it's definitely a reason to stop exercise immediately and follow up with your healthcare provider. And we've touched on vaginal bleeding being placenta previa, or it can be placental abruption, those kinds of things. And then any gush of fluid from the vagina, meaning that your membranes have probably ruptured, meaning your water is broken, meaning you go have a baby. And then dizziness or faintness. So yeah, that's all from the medical examination that I passed out. And we'll touch on, we touched on heart ranges. And on all that, we touched on all these things too. You don't want to scuba dive while you're pregnant. It's just an increase of pressure that can be dangerous. Contact sports, you definitely don't want anybody running into you. You don't want to be falling down while you're pregnant, especially once you get into the second trimester, just because it can be harmful for the baby. Excessive heat exposure, women cannot regulate their temperature as easily when they're pregnant. And then, you don't wanna lay down on your back, obviously don't wanna lay down on your stomach. I feel like that one's obvious, but it should always be said. And then the last slide, avoid the Valsalva maneuver. Flexibility exercises that require insanitary measures to be avoided, but I want to keep in mind that flexibility exercises are very good. Yoga is very good while you're pregnant. I've been doing a lot of yoga and I've never really been into yoga. And then all exercise should be performed on a level surface. Your center of gravity is off, your balance is off. You don't want to risk falling down or anything happening, so you want to make sure that you are stable while you're working out. Now, it's not really the time to work on balancing and that kind of thing, because you'll probably be disappointed to realize how unstable you actually are. Alright, yeah, and then the next is children and youth. So, that's all I've got.
Yeah, good job, man. Great. Okay. So what's the professional organization that puts forth these guidelines? Anybody know? ACOG. What does ACOG stand for? American Council of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. And so that's one group that makes these guidelines. And then the American College of Sports Medicine also. There's some other groups too, but the ACOG is the big dog group that does most of the research and comes up with these guidelines. And you know, she did a great job of going over the Part Q, and this is fairly new stuff. We haven't had a lot of research with exercise in pregnant women, and so you know, it's hard to take. You know, they've done studies where they've taken pregnant women and put them on treadmills and measure stuff, but it's you know, it's very well clinical controlled stuff. It's not normal that people do that type of research, and if they do that kind of research, it's very strictly controlled. So you don't want any problems or issues there. So, and every year there's a death related to ambulance picks up somebody who's pregnant and they don't know they're pregnant, and they maybe haul them on their back in the ambulance, and so then the baby doesn't get oxygen and the baby dies, and so with paramedics that's a concern, especially with you know, with women who've had an accident and they may not be able to communicate that they're pregnant or whatever. So and so that happens rarely, but it has happened there. And so no contact sports, right? No basketball and stuff like that. But you know, there's always exceptions. There's always people that are, you know, exercise nuts, and they run the marathon, they deliver that afternoon, and I think Karina that worked with the volleyball team, I think she was playing professional volleyball, you know, pregnant and stuff like that. So there's always exceptions, but if you do that, you're taking a risk, and so you know, you wouldn't want to play soccer pregnant, and so because of you know, the contact sport and so forth. So but that was excellent. So
I've got a question related to like the high blood pressure and then gestational diabetes. Can exercise prevent those
Yes,
or help with
definitely.
them? Okay.
Which is, yeah, that's why I said that I always thought that like gestational diabetes was just from like people thinking that they needed to eat too much, but by exercising you can like increase your insulin levels, and usually in most cases like your insulin levels make up for the glucose that's being held in your blood. But yeah, that's why one of the goals on the front page says that it's to help prevent gestational glucose intolerance.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Like I have placenta previa, which is I think the second thing on there. And I can't like run and I can't do like any kind of weightlifting, but I just walk a lot. And I usually do like 1 to 2 miles at a time, and so I'll get like 7 to 8 in a day, but I can't do a whole lot at one time. And honestly, like I can feel the pressure like increasing on my stomach. Another thing I didn't mention though is that you can wear, like they make belly bands to help you support that, which can help with things like that, and it can also help prevent hernias and diastasis recti.
Yeah, another thing, after the baby's born, postpartum, you've gained all that weight, and then what happens if you don't exercise?
You don't lose it.
You retain it. And Valda Montgomery, who was a doctoral student under me, and she taught physical therapy in Alabama State. And her doctoral dissertation was looking at black and white females postpartum in terms of how much weight they gained. And the black females tend to retain more weight than the white females did. We don't really understand why, but she found that the black females that exercised postpartum got rid of the extra weight. And it was no difference, or even the black females even did better if they exercised. But if they didn't exercise, they tended to retain that weight. And I've seen statistics some places, the average weight gain postpartum that stays with somebody is maybe 5 to 10 pounds sometimes. So, so that's that's a significant amount of weight. And so that's why exercise is important then. A lot of times, as we talked, pregnancy is one of the healthiest times of your life because it makes me sick to see a woman in Walmart, or someplace smoking when they're pregnant, because you got a baby there and you want it to be healthy, and there's all kind of issues with babies born with brain damage and women that on heroin and narcotics and so forth, because they don't get the right nutrition. And my daughter teaches second grade, and she's got some of those kids in her second grade class that have brain damage because the mother didn't take care of them during the pregnancy. So, there's been babies born to addicts that are babies an addict when they're born. So it's sad. Sad. But yeah, that was good. And so review the chapter, read she did an excellent job. We've got the Part Q thing now that's good. And if you're a personal trainer or work with women who are pregnant, you've got some guidelines to go by. And so that's good. I'm going to go over something real quick. And so this is an older presentation, but it's fairly short. I'm going to talk to you about some things here. And so this talks about, it's sort of relevant today, hard to see, but the early 20th century, the major cause of death was infectious diseases. Average life expectancy was 47 years. We're in this pandemic now. In 1919, there was a huge pandemic, and many people died and so forth. And so infectious diseases were a problem. Smallpox, polio, pneumonia, diphtheria, high infant mortality, tuberculosis, typhoid. Then, we had mumps, measles, chickenpox. And so how do we get rid of all polio, mumps, measles, chickenpox, all that kind of stuff? Vaccines, right? Vaccines got rid of all that. And there's people that want to take a stinking vaccine. It's like, we eradicated polio. We pretty much eradicated mumps. We eradicated measles. We got rid of all these infectious diseases that kill people. And so history's repeating itself. And so now we're in another pandemic, and And the only way we're going to get rid of it is the vaccine, unless you know something better. And so, you know, base your opinion on science, not what your buddy says. Okay? And so it's your decision, but base it on good science and not just somebody's opinion. So, okay. This was the president in 1919, died of typhoid. He was only 60 years of age. So this was Teddy Roosevelt. And then Reagan lived to 93. And so I think he died from Alzheimer's. And so there's a big difference in the wingspan of those two presidents right there. But this is pretty interesting, and this is some stuff I put together. It's a little old, but it's still relevant today. It hadn't changed much there. And so it looks at life expectancy in different countries. It's 83 in Japan. Look at the United States. Do we live longer than people in other countries? No, that's ridiculous, right? We always want to be number one, right? And so here, you know, if you want to live a long time, go to Japan, Switzerland, Australia. You're going to live longer than us, right? Huh? And so Italy, Iceland, and so forth, you know, Spain, I've been to a lot of these countries, United Kingdom, Germany, 80 years, and so, United States, we're down about 78 years, and so, and then Alabama, it's even lower than the average, and so we're significantly less than the average for the nation. Okay, and then this was a quote by Dr. Donald Williamson. I had a meeting with him. And he's a state health officer at that time. Now he works for the Alabama Hospital Association, but he's one of the top people in Alabama. He said, in schools, we train minds and lose bodies. So what does that mean?
There's so much focus on academic and not enough on.
Yeah, we don't care about their body. We just want to teach them academic stuff and then forget most of that stuff, and then they don't do anything for the health of the kids. And so, and I thought that was a good quote. So I agree with it. So I had to put it in here. So, but you know, these are the disease killers in the world. Okay. Means of deaths. Most risk factors are smoking, hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, and physical inactivity. And so the risk factors that we study in this class are the main killers of people. And if we look at this tree of life right here, one of the major factors is low levels of fitness. Okay, and that's related to osteoporosis, depression, cancer, hypertension, cholesterol, arthritis, diabetes, heart and brain disease, and even dependency on drugs. And this is actual causes of death. Look at there. Inactivity before diet. You probably would never guess that. Because there's not a lot of information that addresses that, right? And so, you know, tobacco, we know tobacco kills people, and these other factors there, but physical activity is at the very top of there, poor diet and physical inactivity. Death prevention attributed to the percent of various health conditions, and so you look at this data right here. They studied from the Rogue Center, 40,000 men, about 13,000 women. What they did, they followed them over time, and they took them and brought them in the clinic and measured the fitness level, and then followed them for so many years and see how many of them died over like a 10 or 15 year period. And so they found that most of the deaths occurred related to low cardiovascular fitness. And the way they did that is they brought the people in, walked on the treadmill, and see how many minutes they could walk on the treadmill, like, and predicted their VO2 max. Okay, So if you were in that study and you could only walk on the treadmill like 3 minutes, you're in the low fitness level. You look at your risk of death compared to other variables. It's pretty high, right? Okay? And so in men and women, much higher than obesity. Can you be fat and fit? That's a big question.
Well, to an extent, I suppose, right?
You can. You can be fat and fit. You can be fat and run an 8-minute mile. And you can be fat and fit, and I learned that the hard way. Don't ever look at somebody ahead of you that's maybe twice as wide as you and think you can outrun them. Okay? You can. Finally, I've tried to catch them. I said, I just got to give up, man. I just can't stay with them. And so, sumo wrestlers are fat. They never have heart attacks until they quit sumo wrestling, until they quit training. And so, if somebody's overweight or whatever and obese, if they exercise, they're not at high risk, generally. Okay? So, don't let people fool you. You can't look at people and tell how fit they are just by looking at them and observing them. And we know that's true. And so all these different variables, but the major variable is low cardiovascular fitness. Okay. Okay. And so, and then we know all these different diseases that we can treat with physical activity. Okay. And so, diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, metabolic syndrome, cancer, and so forth. We're good over all that. Okay. Here, longevity, the more you exercise, the lower your risk of death. So these are all huge studies. These are just summary slides from these studies here. And so 0 minutes, and then look at 420 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity. Your risk is cut in half in terms of death. Pretty cool. Okay. And then this is again from that study at the Rugby Center, Dallas, Texas, where they tested thousands of people on treadmills, and they followed them to see how long they lived. And then this is the low fit, the moderate fit, and the high fit group for men and women. Okay, 10,000 men, 3,000 women. Would you like to be in that study? Test you on the treadmill and just wait till you die, and then they put you in a group. And so those aren't easy studies to do. Not easy studies. And just think, if you worked in a lab like ours and you tested 13,000 people, put them on the treadmill and ran them till they couldn't run anymore and walk and so forth. And that's a pretty big study, right? And they had physicians and so forth that managed the study there. And so your risk of death, all-cause mortality, is much higher in the low fit. Moderate does better than moderate fit does better, and then high fit even does better there. And this looks at risk factors. Even if you have risk factors, below moderate or high fit, and if you're high fit and you have one risk factor, high fitness helps take care of that risk factor some, right? You tend to do better. Or even 2 or 3 risk factors. And so if you're high fit and have high blood pressure, if you're high fit and have diabetes, your risk of death is less. Okay? Because of fitness. Okay? It looks at blood pressure, cholesterol, and other variables that we look at there. Okay? And so this is hypertension, low fit, moderate fit, high fit. Okay? Risk of developing hypertension, low fit, you have a much greater risk of what? High blood pressure. 1.5 million people in Alabama have high blood pressure. Now, there's a problem with people exercising in Alabama. Okay? So we know that's true. Breast cancer, all the cancers are related to physical activity. Doesn't mean you won't get it, but it is related there. Okay? Okay. This is one based upon body fat there. It just shows that fitness outweighs body fat. Okay. This looks at mortality, with always sedentary, became sedentary, and then became active. And so if you're sedentary, and became sedentary, okay, this could be the athlete, okay, you got the person that never was active, always sedentary, then you got the athlete that was active and then becomes sedentary, that's the became sedentary, what's the risk there? Not much difference between the always sedentary and became sedentary, right? So what do you gotta do for the next 30, 40 years? Be active, right? Otherwise, you're gonna get in that sedentary category. And then look what happens if you're sedentary or became sedentary, become active.
Wow.
Your risk of death goes what?
Yeah,
Down.
Cut in half, right? And so that's a huge benefit. Y'all want to live a long time, don't you? I'm assuming you do, right? I'm assuming you want to live a long, healthy life, right? Same thing. All these studies are showing the same thing there. Now, this is a huge study, huge diabetes study that they did. And what they did is they had two groups, and they had one group that were pre-diabetic, and they put them in the lifestyle intervention, and the other group, they put them in the metformin. Metformin's a drug they give diabetics, okay? And so if you're diabetic, that you're probably taking metformin and plus some other drugs also. But they looked at a comparison, and this study was funded by a drug company. Okay, it was funded by a drug company, and they were comparing their drug to lifestyle intervention. Lifestyle intervention was physical activity and nutrition. And so then they looked at the people that got diabetes. Okay, and so look at the lifestyle intervention group. They had a 58% reduction in people becoming diabetic. In the drug group, they had a 31% reduction in the people that became diabetic. So, which group would you rather be in? The lifestyle or the metformin group?
Lifestyle.
Lifestyle, right? They had to stop the study early because the Human Subjects Review Board says, hey, you've got to tell these people in this study that if they start exercising and change their lifestyle, they're going to do better than the ones that take your drug. And so they shut them down. Okay? But generally, a lot of people prescribe what? Drugs, right? Okay. You may have to take metformin, but if you take metformin and exercise, that can be a benefit to you there. This is pretty cool. Maybe your parents about this age. Years of added life. If you go from low to moderate fitness level, you increase your lifespan 5.8 years. Low to moderate, 5 years. That's huge, right? Okay. And then if you go from low to high fit, that is what? 8.7 years. Like these guys that do the triathlons and stuff, they don't start till they're 55. And so, and then what happens to their fitness level? What happens to the risk of death from heart attacks and high blood pressure and diabetes? That is huge. Where can you get 8.7 years of extra life? Where can you buy that? You can't buy it. You can be like a billionaire. You can't buy 8.7 years of life. You've gotta earn it. And so, you can't do that. You can do it with physical activity there. Okay, this is a slide, some research I did. What I did, I took life expectancy by states. Okay? And so, if you look here, we've got all the states listed, and want to live the longest.
Hawaii.
Live in Hawaii.
Probably 'cause they're always like walking around in those mountains and jungles and stuff.
Yeah, it's so pretty and warm and cool, nice. Yeah, I did a presentation in Hawaii one time. So man, Waikiki, ooh, cool. And so
All surfing.
Elvis was even there, right? So Diamond Head, he made some movies there and stuff. So look at Hawaii, about 82 years, and then look at Mississippi, West Virginia, and Alabama, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and so we're about 76 years, 75 years. That's 6 to 7 years difference in life span in different states there. And so Minnesota, California, New York, so forth. So there's differences in life expectancy of the different states there. And then, this is part of the research I did, but I looked at life expectancy by the states that participated in any physical activity. Okay? And so the states that participated in more physical activity did what? Lived longer, right? And the states that participated in the least physical activity had the shortest lifespans. And so where's Alabama at? It's one of those little boxes down at the very bottom of the chart there. And then the ones that are up there at the top are the states that have the longer lifespans. And you got that weird little dot over there on the right. What state do you think that is? It's not really a state. Washington, D.C. They're just weird. They don't fit in with anybody, right? And so they're what we call an outlier. And so they're over there on the right-hand side.
So it says they participate in a decent amount of physical activity, but then don't live as long. Is that maybe it's all that stress from politics or something.
I don't know what's wrong with them.
Or lots of car accidents.
The obesity rates, and look at here, life expectancy. The higher the obesity rate, right? The less the life expectancy. And so we're one of those little dots at the bottom down there. Okay. And so if we increase or decrease obesity rates, what happens to life expectancy? Goes up, right? And so I chair the Alabama Obesity Task Force. My goal was to decrease obesity in Alabama. Was I successful? If you gave me a grade, I'd make an F. F.
Is that your fault though, or the participant?
Well, I guess I was the chair, probably my fault, and so, you know, it didn't matter who was the chair. It wasn't going to change, okay? And so we've got a group, and yesterday we met, and we're going to try to. We've got a program called Get Moving Alabama. I don't know if you've heard of it, and so we're going to try to get that thing going again. And try to really put a push on trying to get people more active in the state of Alabama. And so hopefully some of y'all will get involved with that as we get that thing going. So it's the Governor's Commission on Physical Fitness, it's some people in public health, it's myself, some people in cardiac rehab, and somebody at Lakeshore Hospital. We're the ones trying to get that thing going. So then we're going to, after we get it more organized, we're going to invite anybody in the state that wants to be a part of that to help us with that. So it's a good program. We do some good stuff, and we got some people, but overall we've got to change there. So this is a similar kind of thing. Basic obesity again, and so about Alabama's one of those 33% of the population in Alabama is obese. Another 35% is overweight. So if you take all the obese and overweight, that's about 70% of the population in our state there. And so that's a pretty high that number there. Okay? And then it looks at states participating in any physical activity. And so here, Alabama was 5th lowest states in terms of participating in any physical activity. And then, you know, it's amazing. It's almost a straight linear relationship. The more activity that you participate in your state, the longer the people in the state live. And so, not many people see these slides, and so I presented them a few places, but not a lot. But you know, Colorado. Why do you think they live longer? I got two theories.
Probably a lot of their hobbies involve outdoor activities because there's a lot of proximity.
They have a lot of trails and parks, and I said Olympic Training Center in Colorado. I hated it out there, but it was cold. But they're active. They are active. And I think another reason they're not obese is because it's so hard to breathe. And so, nobody's ever tested that. I'm the only one that's figured that out. But when you try to run a 5K or something and you can't get enough air in, you have to hyperventilate just walking across campus, you burn a lot of calories. It's like the people with lung disease, they get really, really skinny because they're trying to do what? Trying to breathe, right? And so, you know, if you have stress, go for a run. You can't worry about stress when you're trying to run. You're trying to worry about breathing. And so, and it's a great way to remove stress, just trying to survive there. So, okay. This is Gallup poll, and they looked at all the states and asked questions about different variables in the states, like blood pressure, health issues, and so forth. And so they have what they call sad states, and they give them a number. And so, in terms of some of the states that are sad, Alabama's a frowny face. We're sort of a sad state. There's our ranking there. We're one of the lowest in terms of diseases and poverty and other kinds of things there. And then you also have some happy states. And so here's some happy states. Colorado, Hawaii, Minnesota. I don't know why Minnesota's so cold there, but y'all been to Minnesota? But if you were in a university in Minnesota, you'd have a tunnel that took you to the next building, and everything's inside. And so there'd be a tunnel to the wellness center, there'd be a tunnel to the library, there'd be a tunnel someplace. You never had to get outside. You're always inside, going through a little tunnel someplace. Air Force Academy's like that too. And so they've got tunnels to every little thing in Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy. They got the boxing ring, the hockey ring, the church. Everything is inside. In Boston, it's that way. Everything is covered inside there. So we want to be what kind of state? Happy state, right? Okay. And so most municipal states, Alabama's ranked number 45. Out of 50. So, not good. There you see the escalator, right? How many people walk up the steps? How many people getting in line for the escalator? CDC shows that. One's on the right in line to get the escalator, one's on the left to walk up the steps. Okay. So, Hawaii's ranked number 1. Highest life expectancy, lowest obesity rates there. Colorado has high life expectancy, low. Has the lowest obesity rates in the nation there. So they have a lot of things going on there. So solutions want to increase what? Life expectancy, right? Okay. How are we going to do that? What's the Williford model? Increase physical activity, right? Decrease obesity, increase educational levels. People that tend to have more education tend to have less disease. They tend to be smarter. They tend to be less obese. They tend to do better. Alabama has one of the highest high school dropout rates in the state. I think they cheat on that, but we have a lot of people that never graduate from high school in this particular state. We have a lot of people in poverty in this state, a lot of poor people. So increase education, increase access to health care. In my opinion, in this country, as many resources as we have, everybody should be able to go to a doctor, right? And get health care. With all the money and resources we have, why can Sweden do it? Why can these other countries have health care for everybody, where in the United States, if you're poor, you got to end up at the emergency room, okay? And so, another one of my things there. Increase income levels. You get smarter people, they're able to spend money on things and exercise and join gyms and so forth. So that helps too. Quality of life and all that, it helps increase lifespan there. Okay. So I've got plenty of presentations I can show you all day long, but the goal is to do what?
Increase life expectancy.
So troopers, I want y'all to do what? Get me out of the F, right? Y'all don't want that F off my record, and so we want to get people more active. And it's not easy. It's hard to motivate people. Really hard to get people to change their habits. And so if you can figure out the way to do that,
So you have to have a cultural shift and like a right to have that happen.
yeah, it has to be cultural. It has to be. Especially with the poor people in the state, we've got to get them. It's like if the only place you can go and find food is Dollar General, and that's the only restaurant. Not restaurant, but the only place to buy food in your neighborhood or whatever.
And some are not even Dollar Generals; it's a convenience store, which is probably even worse.
And bad food is cheap. And so you can go get like a whole thing of Fig Newtons for 99 cents at Walmart, right? I know I buy them, so I know. So yeah, you can get cheap bad food, and so it's harder. It's hard to eat better and good, healthy wise. So I wanted to share that with you, and those are statistics and some things I've learned. And in terms of physical activity, your major, you've got the best product in the whole world. Okay, and so the thing is, we got to do what? We got to sell it, right? And we've got to sell it. And so y'all are smart and young. You got a long life ahead of you, and hopefully things will change in your lifetime. And so, work on your parents, work on your friends, and then people tell you something crazy like, "Where did you get that from? How does that work? Explain that to me. I don't understand why you telling me this." And so, normally they won't have a clue what they're talking about. They can't explain it, but they heard it or saw it on Facebook or something. So that's the way things work. Now your exam, it'll be online, and it'll be based, most of us, on a case study. And so I'm going to email you the case study, and so you'll have a scenario just like your other case study that you had in class. And then on your exam, when you click on that, it'll be a question like, okay, if blood pressure is 200 at rest, is that high blood pressure? Okay, and so you can answer that. That's obvious there. And so, and then you'll have very similar questions like you had on the practice you did in here. And so, based upon the case study, you'll have a few questions on pregnancy. You'll have a few questions on the other chapters and so forth. So that's the exam. So it'll be open from Friday at noon until Sunday night. So it shouldn't be an issue for anybody. You ought to be able to find 30, 40 minutes, an hour to take that during that particular time span. Your final grade, you get the points for the weekly quizzes that we gave, and so those will be 1/3, and then you've got your midterms a third, then your final exam will be a third, and so those add up to so many points, and that'll determine your final grade. Any questions on the exam or anything? Okay, y'all don't go brain dead on me. You only got 2 more minutes. And so, okay, one thing I want you to do is in the future, when you go to PT school, I want you to email me and say, hey, I got into PT school, and let me know what's going on with you. Okay? And so just email me and tell me, okay, I'm going to be working with Lottie Nixon at Valdosta State, and working on strength conditioning and so forth. So I'd like to keep up with you and just see how you do it. Okay? And so it's good to keep up with students in terms of how successful they are, because then I can go brag on you. Alec, man, he's a nutritionist. You ever want a good nutrition guy, you go see him, right? And so I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be doing this, but we'll see. But yeah, keep up. Email me hwillifo@aum.edu, and so let me know how you do it, and if you get into PC school, where you're at, and how it goes, and how that baby goes, and how things in Texas and stuff like that. So just and just communicate with me, so I'll sort of know what's going on with you. Okay. So y'all have a good